Resolution 170968, resolution authorizing the Committee on Rules to hold hearings examining the challenges faced by registered community organizations from abusive lawsuits commonly known as strategic lawsuits against public participation, discussing solutions thereof, including examining means of holding abusive litigants accountable and authorizing the issuance of subpoenas to compel the production of relevant witnesses and documents.
Thank you. I'm going to recognize Councilman Heenan, but Ms. Marconi, why don't you call the first panel so they can be sitting up here ready to go? Okay.
Jeff Hornstein, Joe Schiavo, Jay Johnson, Janet Anderson.
Okay, thank you. Councilman Heenan?
Thank you, Madam Chair and Mr. Chairman.
Madam Chair? Okay.
Clerk.
Oh, okay, there you go.
Being respectful for the late. First, I want to say thank you to everybody for having a hearing so late in the day, amongst their many other responsibilities and jobs, especially for those who have come here to either witness or testify. And of course, I want to thank Chairman Greenlee and all the colleagues who will be joining us. Will be in and out, but most of the colleagues of City Council really understand the situation that RCOs and Friends of groups are in now, and are really pleased to have this hearing. So I want to thank you all for being here, and we do have this opportunity to have the discussion about the roles of our registered community organizations, our civic groups, and our Friends of organizations, and the roles they play in the city of Philadelphia. I want our RCOs and the community organizations to be the pillar of our communities, and that are unafraid to state their views, all right, and to hold a civic and tolerant discourse in the public. So I have worked closely with a lot of and most of the community organizations in my district. I've worked closely with them. Some are here today to testify, some are not, but we've worked and had all-day trainings several times. We've had networking opportunities where we could discuss commonality in policies and what's working and what's not working, refine their civic voices to make sure that it's most effective when it comes to playing the role that is set out by law and its role participating in zoning at the zoning board. So I look forward to getting a lot of things that are said here today that's going to be testified on record, and use that as a vital role for these individuals and all the organizations that play in the process of zoning and some of the struggles that you all may face. And I hope through this we will be able to come to a consensus in a direction moving forward to find a solution that works for everyone, our community organizations, our developers, and to the city of Philadelphia. And I know this conversation is worth having, and I'm eager to begin our hearing here today. So thank you all for coming.
Thank you, Councilman. Thank you for the leadership on this important issue. Just a few quick ground rules. I think a lot of you have been here before, so you know what I'm going to probably say. We want everybody to get their point across, but we have upwards to 21 on my list right now. People want to speak. So in fairness to the ones that are in the back, if people could, we want you to get to your point. We want you to get your point across, but we ask you to please be as brief and concise as possible. If you have written testimony, that written testimony will already be part of the record. And if you could summarize those, and then obviously we'll have a discussion after each panel is complete. Jeff, I think you were the first name called, so why don't you lead off here?
Thank you, Councilman. My name is Jeff Hornstein. I'm the chair of the Philadelphia Crosstown Coalition. I first want to start off by thanking you, Chairman Greenlee, and Councilman Heenan for your leadership, for convening this important hearing. And Councilman Heenan in particular, your staff has just been tremendous in reaching out, even outside your district, to the civic organizations. Ryan, Courtney, Tom, you just have a great staff, so I wanted to go on record saying that. And I also wanted to say that that Councilman Squilla, who's not here right now, has been an amazing partner to the civic world. Since July 1st, 2017, I've been the chair of the Crosstown Coalition. We're a federation of now 34 civic associations spanning, as we like to say, from Society Hill to Cobb's Creek, from Kensington to Packer Park. We truly are a citywide organization, growing rapidly in the last 6 months. We've been deputized, we could say, through the registered community organization provision in the 2012 zoning code as agents of the city for purposes of zoning and land use decisions. We are the front line in the zoning process. When a developer is handed a zoning refusal at L&I, he or she must come to the RCO in that neighborhood before going to the Zoning Board of Adjustment. In principle, this assures some level of community input when changes to the zoning at the neighborhood level are proposed. Our RCO zoning committees, for those of you who don't know, are made up of incredibly dedicated citizens who spend hours every month hearing variance requests. The vast majority of RCOs take this role very seriously, balancing the needs of their communities with the interests of private property owners. It is often a very difficult task and often a thankless job for which there is minimal training. And here I'd be remiss if I did not give a shout out here to the Excellent Citizens Planning Institute. Great program, but its resources and reach are unfortunately quite limited. Having spent a fair amount of time talking with Senator Farnese and his staff about anti-SLAPP legislation at the state level, I've heard many horror stories of community organizations and individuals losing their homes and livelihoods due to lawsuits filed, often frivolously, by developers who did not like community input in their decision-making. As most people in this room probably know, Pennsylvania has very weak protections for the free speech of civic organizations, unlike many other states. The risk associated with playing the RCO function should not be underestimated. As you will hear from several RCOs today, if a developer is unhappy with the way they are treated at an RCO zoning meeting, he or she can and often does file a lawsuit against the organization that convened the meeting. If that organization does not have the wherewithal to defend itself, its leadership can find itself enmeshed in an expensive and potentially ruinous legal defense. It can be expensive and damaging both on an organizational and an individual basis. Many of our neighborhood organizations operate with minimal budgets. Many do not realize the risk they take on in playing their RCO roles. An RCO that has appropriately defended its community's interests could easily find itself on the defending end of an expensive lawsuit called a strategic lawsuit against public participation, or SLAPP, from the developer. In my opinion, the city does very little to educate or emphasize the risks involved in this role. One prominent city official even asserted that insurance was not necessary to play the RCO role. I was flabbergasted. I certainly would not have spent 3 years on the zoning committee at Queen Village Neighbors Association unless I knew that my home and assets were protected by a directors and officers insurance policy. It's vital that every RCO have adequate directors and officers insurance, at least $1 million in coverage. For many RCOs, obtaining D&O insurance, which costs well over $1,000 a year, assuming no loss history, is out of the question. One claim, even a frivolous one, can double or triple the cost of coverage or make an organization uninsurable altogether. Even when the organization has the necessary resources to obtain D&O insurance, because civic organizations are not high-value customers for insurance companies, the defenses put forward by the insurance companies are often woefully inadequate. They often choose to settle rather than fight, with the consequence that the organization is then unable to obtain insurance for the following year because they've had a claim against their policy. While the Crosstown Coalition is exploring the possibility of providing a group insurance policy for all of our member organizations, and we're actually making some significant progress in that front, we believe that the city ought to be insuring all RCOs under some sort of umbrella policy. Because the city essentially relies on our organizations to play a structured role during the zoning and land use process, it makes sense to us that the city ought to pay for our insurance, or at least subsidize those groups which cannot afford it on their own, under a blanket policy that the city could provide or at least help us negotiate. It is our understanding that the city provides some liability protection for its Friends of the Parks groups. Why can't it do the same thing for its RCOs? We look forward to working with this council as it attempts to figure out ways to protect the freedom of speech of valued civic organizations like its dozens of RCOs. Thank you for your time this afternoon, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Okay, thank you. And we're going to hear from the panel, the whole panel, before we ask questions. Just do want the record to reflect Councilman Squilla, Vice Chair of the committee, is present. And just for the record, Jeff Hornstein already says something nice about you.
He appeared just as I said his name.
Yeah, right, okay. Joe, I think you were...
One good thing.
Joe, I think you were next if you want to go.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Chairman Greenlee and members of the committee. I appreciate the opportunity to make comment on Resolution 170968 and wish to thank Councilman Heenan for his leadership in this important matter, and thank co-sponsors Green, Parker, Squilla, and Johnson for contributing their voices in support of this important initiative. We know what the acronym means relative to SLAPP lawsuits, but in my opinion, SLAPP lawsuits are a malicious strategic assault intended to inflict maximum target-specific harm as well as collateral damage by way of residual inhibition of future public participation in due process. The entity bringing the SLAPP lawsuit may achieve its goal of destroying or incapacitating an RCO or other civic organization for the truly modest investment of a filing fee only. However, those who bring SLAPP lawsuits never intend to fund the suit, do not prepare a case, and may drop the suit just prior to any real cost incurred. However, the defendant and their insurer have no option but to responsibly respond to the lawsuit and spend as if the case will be heard by the courts. It's this defense preparation cost that soils the insurance record of the defendant, exacting the damage intended by the entity launching the SLAPP lawsuit. It is a lawsuit. It's a legal process, and there's a strong tendency to allow such matters to be resolved by the court system under the protocols of law. However, the current culture of SLAPP lawsuits is a perverse, weaponized version of a legal process. The victims, collateral damage, and likely future casualties are becoming difficult to ignore. The stories and circumstances associated with Old City, Bella Vista, Fishtown, and others, each significantly impacted by malicious SLAPP lawsuits, could easily be the story of any Philadelphia civic group. There are thousands of good Philadelphians volunteering their precious time in service to their communities through civic organizations. These civic organizations serve a key function in our democratic society and our city. There is no substitute or replacement for the role played by these volunteer organizations. Currently, each RCO, each volunteer civic organization is terribly exposed and vulnerable to SLAPP lawsuits and faultless loss of D&O insurance coverage, resulting in the cessation of business. In a perfect world, satisfactory solution to this issue would come down from our state legislators. In our world, Council now has an opportunity to serve its public by promulgating local regulations that will protect RCOs from SLAPP lawsuits and establish reasonable consequences as a detriment to those who would practice such malicious abuse of the legal system. This concludes my testimony, and like Jeff, I'd be glad to answer any questions relative to my history as a board member of Old City Civic Association.
Yeah. I see, unfortunately, it lists you as former Old City Civic Association. So
exactly.
We're familiar with the situation, but that may come out a little bit.
Existence.
Whoever would like to go next. Okay, Ms. Anderson.
Good afternoon. I'm Janet Anderson from Wissahickon Interested Citizens Association. We call ourselves WICA. Our boundaries are the Wissahickon Creek to the intersection of Ridge Avenue and Main Street at the bottom of the hill, all the way up the hill, up Ridge Avenue to Schurz and Walnut Lane. And I thank you for your interest. I just found out about this meeting yesterday, so this will be brief. Currently, our group has D&O liability insurance that we hope will be renewed in September, but that is now in jeopardy. Just yesterday, I received word that our group is facing the possibility of being sued by Western Development Company. In late December 2017, our zoning chairperson was sued as an individual because the minutes of our zoning committee meetings on our website. The parcel of ground that Western is seeking to purchase is quite small and will require at least 3 zoning variances, including steep slope. Our D&O carrier has agreed to defend the suit. A fair and equitable settlement was reached, but just yesterday, Western withdrew and presented a much more difficult offer, and that resulted in our zoning chairman declining the settlement. Yesterday afternoon, late in the afternoon, our zoning chair was informed by Westrum's attorney they are now considering suing WICA because our insurance company is defending the zoning chair. And they have pressured him to present a deadline settlement close of business today. And if the chairman and Westrum can't reach a settlement, Westrum is threatening to sue WICA. That's exactly why RCOs need protection from SLAPP suits, and we need it now. How can an RCO function if we live in constant fear of being sued? My fellow RCO presidents and I respectfully ask the council for legislation to give us proper coverage while we work with developers to strive to work, and we've done that in the past. WICA is working with developers. We're not bad guys. We want responsible, fair development. And thank you for your time.
Thank you, Ms. Anderson. Mr. Johnson, before you start, just want the record reflect Councilwoman Bass, member of the committee, is present. Please, sir, identify yourself for the record and proceed.
Sure. Good afternoon. My name is Jay Johnson. I'm from the Winfield Residents Association. We're also known as WRA. Okay. So thank you for asking me to speak before you today. Our organization back in 2014 was sued by a parent of a child that went to our day camp. And at that time, we did not have any liability insurance. We had carried liability insurance for a few years, but due to the cost, we were not able to keep that running, and the policy lapsed. So we had to take on the responsibility of ourselves to get representation, which our budget could not handle. Fortunately, one of our neighbors is an attorney, and she agreed to take on the case pro bono, and she represented us until she was elected into a judgeship. So then she had to recluse herself. At that point, she referred us to colleagues of her, a law firm here in the city, and they agreed to take on the case, but at a discounted rate. So we had to struggle and come up with money just to resolve ourselves from this furious lawsuit. It's a hardship. It was a hardship on our civic association. It continues to be a hardship on our civic association. We are constantly being asked by our board of directors what will happen if they get sued. They work very hard for their homes. They don't wish to have that in jeopardy. And it's becoming very difficult to get representation from the community to serve on our board because of this fear of being sued. So I thank you for listening to my testimony this afternoon. Thank you.
All right, thank you all. Please first let the record reflect Councilwoman Reynolds Brown, member of the committee, is present. I know Councilman Heenan has some questions, but let me just ask, going back to Mr. Hornstein here. You talk about Senator Farnese's state legislation. Could you just briefly kind of describe that and where it might be at this point? I'm kind of
So he actually published an op-ed today. I figured you guys had something to do with that, but it came out today.
I saw that, yes.
Senate Bill 95. It's actually passed the Senate twice with an overwhelming majority. It's wending its way through the House. Frankly,
okay.
We had a very good conversation with State Rep John Taylor a few months before he decided he was stepping down. And he said he was going to help shepherd that through the House, because in the House there needs to be Republican leadership there. So I know some of our colleagues, the Crosstown Coalition is we now have some membership in the Northeast, in large part due to the great work of Councilman Heenan's office in encouraging people to become part of larger organizations. And so the Northeast Civics are talking to Representative Martina White and others about becoming co-sponsors of the legislation so that it will actually get through the House. The bill would mirror bills in many other states, which would basically make sure that if a frivolous lawsuit is filed, there's an economic disincentive from doing so, and would assign a master to determine if the lawsuit has validity. So it would really put the brakes on a lot of these frivolous lawsuits, and frankly, put Pennsylvania in league with the rest of the country in terms of protecting the freedom of speech of community organizations. And I think the stories you've heard, even just on this first panel, I'm pretty sure council gets this, right?
Right,
If we can
right.
if our state legislature could get off the dime and do it. But, as a Crosstown Coalition, we're going to move forward and get a policy that covers all of our members. That's our goal right now, so I encourage anyone in this room who's not a member to come check us out and think about it, because it's going to be, having a group policy is always going to be stronger and more robust than not having a group policy.
Yeah. Let me ask you on that note, as far as getting state action, I know that's always tough to get something done in Harrisburg, but have groups, community groups, I don't know if they use the word RCOs, but groups around the state, to your knowledge, have they run into this problem in some other
Absolutely.
counties? And
Absolutely. The senator had a press conference, I guess it was the summer, in the mayor's reception room, and I was there on behalf of the Crosstown Coalition. There were a few other local civic associations, but there were organizations from other parts of the state represented. Okay. I mean, there was a group of ordinary citizens who weren't even part of an organization who showed up in the counties and said something about a development project that was true, about it being built on a brownfield, and the developer wasn't taking that seriously. Okay. And that developer actually started surveilling those people, following them around to meetings, like this was like the Stasi in East Germany or something, and those people ended up getting sued as individuals, and some of them almost lost their houses. It was only when the Delaware River Keepers Network was able to come in with a bunch of money to defend them that they didn't lose their homes. I mean, this is a serious problem, not just for RCOs in the city of Philadelphia, but any civic group, a volunteer fire company. This cuts across the board. The bedrock of our democratic society is people participating as citizens, and this is a way, as Joe suggested, of squashing people's current and future participation. Because if you see your neighbor get sued because they stood up at a meeting, how different is that than being in a totalitarian society where people are afraid to speak up?
Now, the reason I ask that, obviously, if we're trying to pass something throughout the whole state, obviously, if it's sometimes portrayed as just benefiting Philadelphia, that's not the most advantageous for us out there. So that's why I wanted to know if there was others. So it's certainly a statewide issue.
I think Peter Gold's on one of these panels, and he's done an incredible amount of work on this issue.
We'll have written testimony from him. He's not here, I don't believe. First, before I recognize Councilman Heenan, just wanted to record reflect Councilman Taubenberger, a member of the committee, is present, and Councilman Heenan.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. A couple of questions. First, Councilman Squilla had stepped out. In 2016, he introduced some SLAPP legislation and some variations, and this has been an ongoing issue, but with the ongoing participation of public participation in the form of community groups and civic associations and friends of, their freedom of speech, as you noted, has been required, quite frankly, by us, right? In the city of Philadelphia and an independent board of called the zoning board. So the freedom of speech was critical in your description of the Senate Bill or House Bill 95, Senate Bill 95, which is now currently in the House Judiciary Committee, and that's where it lies. I'm not saying it dies, but that's where it lies. But the two major components of that bill is, one, recognizing the freedom of speech for public participants, such as taking public positions, such as RCOs and community groups and individuals. But in addition to the court may, or the master may, have the complainant who filed a frivolous charge cover the court costs and legal fees associated with that. So, there is, a lot of, I think, there are two important components of that legislation that sits in Harrisburg right now. But we, as we do here in the city of Philadelphia, and every member I can attest to that is a part of this body, works and communicates with RCOs and friends of groups and people all throughout the city of Philadelphia. I have some questions for Jeff. For the record, can you just, in short, all right, in short, simple terms, explain what D&O insurance is, what it covers, and how it is impacted when a SLAPP suit is filed or threatened?
Thanks. I'll be brief, however long it takes. So D&O insurance is directors and officers insurance. It covers the directors, committee chairs, significant officers of a nonprofit organization, but it also, corporations have this for their boards. And the idea is that it provides coverage if the organization is sued. It provides coverage for those individuals. Right now, and you'll hear more about this from some other panelists who've actually been through this directly with their civics. If a suit is filed, the insurance companies, as I alluded to, tend to settle, which means that they have a claim on their record, and that claim then makes it very difficult to get your insurance renewed, and if it's going to be renewed, it's going to be much more expensive. So the terrain among the 34 members, even in the Crosstown Coalition, there are some organizations that have $200,000 budgets, and for them, adding $500 or $600 or $1,000 or $2,000 to their D&O policy is not a big deal. Most of our organizations have budgets of less than $10,000, and some of them even smaller than that. So for them to have to scrape together $2,000, $3,000, one organization now that I know of is paying $5,000 a year for D&O insurance, you're not going to get a person with a house and a job to volunteer in their neighborhood if they're not covered. I certainly would, and I know most people that I know would not either.
So Jeff, since RCOs take public positions, it could potentially change the rate issue of insurance, right,
Yeah.
for premiums. All right,
Absolutely.
In the insurance. Second, becoming an RCO versus an unaffiliated community organization have any impact on that organization's ability to obtain D&O insurance?
I can't speak to that, but I don't think an insurer is going to even consider insuring you unless you have a board of directors that's elected, you have some assets. So Joe may be able to speak to this more directly because he's now in that position, being a sort of unaffiliated organization. But the members of the Crosstown are all basically civic associations with, RCO status.
Are there different, to your knowledge, with regards to rates for D&O insurance? Is there a difference with the rates for an RCO compared to some other nonprofit organizations?
I couldn't speak to that.
Can you explain how the damage award process works on a SLAPP case?
I think Joe would be in a better position to talk about this because I've never actually been through one myself.
Like what types of awards for a SLAPP case would be awarded? So if you could...
You mean what sort of awards were sought by the entity?
So what is the process of a SLAPP case? All right, so
Okay,
give an example of that to your knowledge, and currently what types of damages can be awarded in a SLAPP case?
Well,
Besides the function of putting a RCO out of business or a friend.
okay, aside from that. Well, like any approach, any legal approach, usually they're asking for more than would actually remedy the issue they claim. And so I just need to say, it may seem that part of the response I'm about to give you is vague, but I'm actually gagged from discussing any of the cases. You see, that's part of the settlement. The settlement always includes that you can't discuss the detail of the case with anyone.
A hypothetical situation.
Hypothetical, so I'll go with that.
Process and the current types of damages and the time it takes for, how quickly does it move?
Well, it isn't quickly.
And the cost that is.
Obviously, you're served, And once you're served, you must notify your carrier. Immediately, you have no choice. Once you notify your carrier, within 24 hours, your carrier, the company that insures you will assign attorneys to your case, an attorney or attorneys to your case, depending on the nature of the case. That all happens very quickly. Within just 48 hours, you're being interviewed by all the attorneys involved in the case. They're attempting to decipher if there's any substance to the claims. Now, the claims are remarkably broad. It won't be a single claim. It will be based on malicious interference with business opportunity and all the ways you could possibly describe that. You'd be amazed how many ways it could be described that by testifying before the ZBA, you created a multitude of...
So exercising your First Amendment right.
Yes. And so, and of course, you're defending against things that never happened, that you never had an opportunity to do or say, but you have to defend against them. And so, of course, this cost a lot of money because every board member has to be interviewed. Everyone who attended the hearings, meetings, they all have to be interviewed. Transcripts have to be examined, minutes of meetings have to be examined. It's very costly for the party that insures you. And all this time, the entity that brought the suit, they're not going to invest a single dollar in legal time. The filing fee is the basis of launching the suit and creating the claim, the complaint, as it's called. And so, but your company, your carrier, has no option but to responsibly defend you and answer every one of these charges in the complaint. And that's costly. And that's what does the damage to the, civic organization, the volunteer organization.
Does the
And
damage
if I can
award
just add to
process
that-
move quickly?
Does it move? No, actually.
Or does it tend to become protracted?
Yes. In that, as your legal team may respond, then their legal team, which may or may not exist, has an opportunity to simply say, we need more clarity, and push the documents back and ask for more clarity. This can go on for months. So, for example, the last 3 cases where I was individually named along with the Civic Association, none of them ended before 4 months, and 2 of them went on for over 9 months. And for 9 months, our carrier was paying the legal fees.
And just to add on to that, so as I stated earlier, the typical D&O policy costs $1,000 to $2,000, let's say. Let's say it's $1,500. So let's say Joe's organization or my organization has been paying that fee for 15 years. That one lawsuit costs way more for the carrier than all those claims. So why are they going to want to insure us in the future? Because we've just cost them way more than we're ever going to put back in the pot, which is one of the reasons we want to do a group
So
plan.
I would like to say just one more thing about it. Of the last 3 claims against the Old City Civic Association, none of those claims even went to the discovery phase, because that would require that the party who brought the suit would have to prepare. So they don't get that far. It's maximum damage done at the cost of a filing fee.
On that, before I recognize Councilman Squilla, I'm sorry, I don't think this was brought up, I was distracted for a minute. Has anybody tried to countersue on that kind of issue, saying, look, these groups are bringing, this was a frivolous lawsuit to start with? Now, obviously, that costs money with lawyers and all, but I don't know if anybody's ever tried that,
It's a very good question.
To your knowledge.
It's a very good question, and the answer is no in each of the last 3 cases for this reason. It's part of the settlement.
Mm-hmm.
It's part of the settlement that the carrier negotiates that you can't countersue.
Okay.
You'll hear, I
Lawyers.
think, future testimony from another civic who took a different path
Okay.
with that, so.
Okay, thank you. Councilman Squilla.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. And I appreciate you all for testifying, because this has been going on for far too long. And, we had introduced an ordinance to try to do it in the city. And we're told by our law department that it would need a state authority to to change that. But we, we would have to be challenged on that. If we made it a law, we would have to be challenged, and our law department didn't feel comfortable. And I know you just mentioned, Jeff, that another group had D&O insurance, and they end up hiring their own attorneys. And I'm sure we'll hear about that. But, they did that because they didn't want to settle, and they wanted to make sure it went all the way through, and therefore, but they had the ability to do that. They had some people who were willing to work with them. Not every RCO has that ability to do that. And, we need to look at ways to try to protect them. I know we met with the Planning Commission folks and some other folks to see if we could get the city to use some type of umbrella insurance, sort of like they do with the advisory councils with Parks and Rec. But it sounded like at that point then they would change the RCO status in the legislation, so we didn't need to. They didn't think they were liable or would be able to cover every RCO in the city of Philadelphia. And I know, Jeff, in Crosstown, you guys had looked at some other ways to try to do some group insurance. Don't know where that is at this time, but we need to come up with a solution, right? And we need to all work together to try to find a way to do that. And I think by hearing these stories is a good start, but then we have to try to put our heads together to say, what are the next steps, and then how do we get that protection in place? And that's why we're here today. So thank you all for testifying, and appreciate your time.
Thank you all very much. Thank you for all your efforts. Ms. Marconi, you want to? Noel. Thanks, Joe. Actually, before they're called, for the record, I wanted to note that we have written testimony from, and it will be made part of the record, from Peter Gold of the Gold Group LLC, Chris Bordelon, if I'm pronouncing that right, from the Somerton Civic Association, David Lee from Walnut Hill Community Association, and Lou Hallis from East Tarsdale Civic Association. Thank you. Ms. Marconi, who do we have next?
Stephen Huntington, Joseph Sanuti, Linda Loff, and Matt Rubin.
Okay. Yeah.
I just scoot this down.
All right, I heard 4 names mentioned. I'm seeing 5 people come up. Who we got?
My name is Nancy Kearns. I was told by Councilman Heenan's assistant, Ryan Keller, to come with Linda.
What's she saying? I
Penny
can't
Back.
understand. What's she saying?
She's with the Friends of Pennyback.
All right, let's see. Steve, why don't you go first? Your name was called first. Go ahead.
Thank you, Councilman. Thanks to the committee and to Councilman Heenan and to Councilman Squilla, who have shown support for this effort throughout the years. I'm not going to read our remarks into the record. You have our written comments.
Yes.
I'm speaking on behalf of Center City residents this morning. We support the efforts. I think that anything we could add to the record has been very articulately phrased by the previous panel, in particular Jeff Hornstein. Center City residents is a member of the coalition, and we support Jeff's very articulate comments. By way of general background to some of the questions which emerged, the Crosstown worked with Senator Farnese in the draft of Senate Bill 95. When we were working on it, I reviewed the literature, and at that time there were 28 states that had anti-SLAPP provisions. The bill was presented at the end of 2015 to the State Judiciary Committee, and it's been stuck there. It was reported out of the Senate 48-2. The bill was modeled after the Arizona and California statutes. And in response to Councilman Heenan's questions about the processing of a SLAPP suit, in my other life, before I retired, I did insurance company defense work. We did D&O defense, not for civic associations, for corporations. if you're sued in Philadelphia, even for an arbitration case less than $50,000, you don't get to arbitration earlier than 15, 18 months. So that's the time frame you're looking at. And certainly from the insurance carrier's perspective, their initial goal is to see whether the case can be settled to cut down the defense costs. So the testimony you heard from Joe Schiavo certainly is characteristic of what happens when these suits arrive. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Who'd like to go next? You got to speak right in the microphone, okay, so we can hear you.
I don't need two, I don't think. Let's just.
No, you don't have to do two, just one.
You called Joe Sanuti. My name is Connie Delori Shepis.
Okay.
Joe Sanuti, excuse me, is the president of our civic association,
Okay.
and at the last minute was unable to attend.
Sure.
Therefore, I don't have his written remarks. But I speak from the heart. I represent the Tacony Civic Association. I'm here with another board member, Sam Shepis, who's chairman of the zoning committee. Tacony goes from Frankfurt Avenue, we share with Mayfair, to the river, and we go from Robbins Avenue in the south to Cotman Avenue in the north. We're a really easy, square district, and all of our other CEOs, Holmesburg and Mayfair and Wizenoming, all ring us. The Tacony Civic Association is one that's a good 50 years old and has been extremely active from when we were children. My husband and I remember a neighbor who was also the zoning committee chairman and did good work in the 60s and 70s for our neighborhood. The SLAP lawsuits that we're all struggling with do more than hurt the civic associations. It influences the way neighbors decide whether they want to give up that valuable little bit of free time they have and commit to a larger cause. In Tacony, our families go back many generations. Mine has been there since 1905. There's been a Giovanelli or a Di Lorenzo in Tacony for that many years. So, and I'm not the only case. We're an immigrant neighborhood. Polish, and then eventually German, and then eventually Italian. That's what we are, and we go back generations. So the people who live in Tacony, we're not really going anywhere. We want to kind of be involved. And as this SLAP language becomes more familiar to people just in the news, they are very hesitant to get involved. So it limits our future leadership. You know, civic associations are sort of like the big box stores in a mall. The more stable RCOs that you can put throughout the city, the more stable those neighborhoods become. And if we begin to threaten the big box stores, so to speak, or the anchors, is another way of saying it, if we begin to threaten them, then the other smaller fabric threads that are in those neighborhoods, the friends of, the support groups for other smaller, they're going to disappear, and then that fabric in those neighborhoods just go away. Philadelphia, along with other cities across this country, not to say even the state, but across this country, are going through a development boom. Philadelphia is in a development boom that we really can't see the end of it yet. It's housing, it's economic, it's transportation. There's lots of development, and because of that, there is a hunger for land, for airspace, and for development that neighbors are not comfortable giving up. We are not anti-development, and I would say that most people who belong to a civic association are all about development. Community development is more than bodies and souls. It's bricks and mortars, and we are interested in all four elements of community development. We need help with the bricks and the mortar. We're doing really good with bodies and souls. We have people committing. We have volunteers. Cleanups are going wonderful. Abandoned houses are being sucked up and rehabbed. We're doing really good with that. But the bricks and mortar, the business of being a community organization is drowning us. It is above our heads. We are simply people who live in our neighborhoods and who love it. We are not willing to risk our livelihood for it, our lifestyle for it, our reputations for it, but we're willing to risk everything else. Just help us.
Okay.
That's the level that I speak to. Others are more familiar with the legislation and the insurance matters. I'm telling you that the SLAP legislation will help us develop bodies and souls and bricks and mortar in a very responsible, proactive way, and we need your help. And thank you, Councilman Heenan. I'm proud to say I'm a constituent in your district, and thank you very much to the committee for taking the time in this late part of the day to listen to what we have to say.
Okay, thank you, ma'am. Thank you very much. Okay, who'd like to go next?
Yes.
Please state your name and proceed.
Yes. Good afternoon. I'm Linda Lauf. I'm the president of the Friends of Pennypack Park, an all-volunteer friends group located in the 6th and 10th Council District. Our park contains 1,688 acres and stretches from the Delaware River to the Montgomery County border. We have approximately 1,500 members, many who volunteer and keep our parks looking good. Many of them are in the audience today. If you've never visited our park, let me share some of its special features. We have baseball and soccer fields in the mouth of the Pennypack, along with nesting bald eagles. It has the oldest stone arch bridge built in 1697, crossing the creek where many Revolutionary soldiers and today's cars and SEPTA buses transverse Frankfort Avenue daily, a band shell where summer concerts delight the community citizens, and a wonderful Pennypack Environmental Center, which conduct campfires and lots of educational programs. There is also a 10-mile-long bicycle path and many miles of walking trails through the park. The Pennypack Creek, the waterway itself, threads through this park, providing a calming refuge to all visitors. Its name was given by the local Lenape Indians who lived along the Pennypaca centuries ago. The reason I share this park's history is to understand why our members are so passionate about our park. Our members donate countless hours to keep the park clean, reduce erosion by building water bars, and to plant many trees to combat the loss caused by age. We want Pennypack to be viable for future Philadelphia citizens to enjoy. This is the reason why I'm here today. In order for the Friends of Pennypack Park to function as a volunteer organization, we need liability insurance to safeguard our members and officers. The Friends of Pennypack Park was sued 3 years ago when a teenager tragically lost his life when he jumped into the swollen waters of the creek. Our organization had no involvement in this young man's death, but because we volunteer in the park, we were also sued. The City of Philadelphia settled, but we were taken to court. We lost our insurance coverage and had difficulty obtaining new liability insurance coverage. We had to approach multiple insurance companies trying to locate a company willing to insure our organization due to the lawsuit. When we did locate an insurance company willing to provide insurance, we had to pay a premium twice as high as prior to the lawsuit. But the saga continues. The Friends of Pennypack is being sued again. With this lawsuit, our fear is we will become uninsurable. No insurance means no Friends of Pennypack Park. Why would any park member volunteer to improve their local park when they're at risk of losing their home and/or assets if they're sued? Our organization cannot exist without insurance to protect our members. The City of Philadelphia has no legislation that protects volunteers or 501c3 organizations such as ours from being sued. The state of Pennsylvania has a Good Samaritan Act, but that only protects individuals who aid someone in medical need. Currently, there is no law that protects our volunteers who work and do good deeds in the park. The Philadelphia Department of Parks and Recreation, I believe, is proud of the partnerships they have established with many Friends park groups. The city counsel in these hours of free labor, whether provided by volunteers in a pocket park or in our large watershed parks. But these volunteer groups have no protection for any of the work they do that benefits the park. What prevents any citizen who trips, falls, and gets injured in their neighborhood park, or a bicyclist driving into a tree and getting knocked unconscious from suing us? We can be sued because of an act of God. We might be sued just because the lawyers think we have deep pockets of money. The city will lose the park supporters they have tried hard to cultivate. And more importantly, the city will lose thousands of hours of volunteer labor that benefit our parks. This is an impact to the department, which has experienced large budget cuts in the past, and our parks would quickly fall into disrepair again. Dear council members, this is my request. The Friends of Pennypack Park, along with other Friends Park groups, are requesting legislation that would protect individuals from suing volunteer or 501(c) organizations who work on behalf of the City Department of Parks and Recreation. This would communicate to the citizens of the city that our volunteers and the work that they do is valued by all. This legislation would reduce organizational cost, would allow us to direct our funds to programs and projects benefiting our park. Please give this legislation your attention and take action as quickly as possible. Our continued existence is dependent upon you making the right decision that protects and supports Friends groups.
Okay.
Thank you for your attention.
All right, thank you, Ms. Loff. First, let me just, for the record, recognize that Councilwoman Blackwell is present. Ma'am, I understand you're with the same group with the Friends?
Yeah.
Really, we really are trying, just to be fair to everybody, to just have one representative from each group, okay? If you have written testimony, you can certainly submit it.
I did submit that, yeah.
Okay, fine, okay? Thank you, because I really,
Yeah, I
I want to be fair to everybody here, and there's a lot of people waiting,
That's fine.
okay? All right, thank you. Thank you very much. Mr. Rubin. We have your written testimony.
Oh, yes,
and you-
indeed.
I must say, for the record, you give the highlights very well in your written testimony.
I figured it'd be quicker to read that way.
Yeah, right, right,
Uh,
okay.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Councilman Heenan, for introducing this resolution, Councilman Squilla for being a wonderful representative, and also for doing work on this in the past, and to the rest of the members of the committee. Very happy to be able to, well, not happy, but very grateful to be able to testify on this matter. My name is Matt Rubin. I'm with the Northern Liberties Neighbors Association. I've been on the board of directors since 2001 and have been president of the organization for 14 of the past 17 years. Given what's been ably said already, I thought I would just skip 90% of what's in my written testimony and just tell you about what Councilman Heenan asked about the previous panel, which is our experience with slap suits. We have been very fortunate and frankly lucky, and we have been sued twice with slap suits, and we're still around to tell about it, and we're not constrained by a gag order, which is unusual. So I wish our experience was more typical, but it's not. But it allows me to tell you what happened.
I think they're scared of you, Matt. I think that's the
I would
problem.
hope so. I think that's, I wish. So we were sued in 2004. I'm not going to go into details on that, except suffice to say that we didn't have to settle because the plaintiff withdrew the case because the person who filed the suit had left the country by the time it was, that's the kind of person who, this person also flashed a pistol to a local news reporter who was trying to work on the story. More significantly and more recently, in 2013, we were hit with a slap suit. And for those members of council familiar, we were simply hit because we had a restaurant in the neighborhood that was illegally operating as a nightclub for about 3 months and did not have a special assembly and occupancy license. We did what every RCO would do. We took in neighbor complaints. When they finally went for their license, we had a meeting and we testified at a hearing. For that, this individual filed a federal lawsuit against us, alleging violations of civil rights, defamation, tortious interference. I believe there were more than 12.5 complaints, each one alleging more than $50,000 of damages. They sued us, they sued me personally, the chair of our zoning committee, 5 individual residents, the city of Philadelphia, I think Councilman Squilla, the police department, the local police captain, one of his officers, 2 online publications, and an online discussion forum. It took 18 months to resolve this case. And the only reason that we're still here is because the number one thing we learned is when it comes to D&O and SLAPP suits, the first adversary you have to fight is not the plaintiff, it's your insurance company. Our insurance companies pointed the finger at each other because we have D&O and general liability, and they refused to even give us a yes or no answer on whether or not we were covered before the deadline that we had to respond to the court to the suit. We had to hire our own attorney, and it was only because our attorney was willing to work for probably 1/3 of the going rate that they were willing to accept the insurance company's reimbursal rate for outside counsel. And that is the only reason that we survived. The allegations in a SLAPP suit do not have to have any merit because there is no way for a judge to rule on the merits of the case until you've gone through all the time and expense of motions, preliminary hearings, motion to dismiss, discovery, and deposition, and sometimes trial. You cannot even begin to try to recover damages or countersue through what's called a Dragonetti motion unless or until you finish the case and prevail. So if you settle, there's no Dragonetti. If you win and they appeal, there's no Dragonetti. This creates perverse incentives for insurance companies to settle in ways that paint a target on your back as an RCO for the next bad actor who wants to sue you. It creates incentives for them to drop you because they don't care if the suit has merit, they only care how much it costs them. So if we had a system where, with an anti-SLAPP law, you could go in at the front end and a judge or someone could rule on the merits, then people wouldn't even file SLAPP suits because A, they wouldn't work, and B, they'd end up paying court costs and penalties. So I'm happy to talk more about our situation if you like, but I think you know all the ins and outs of SLAPP suits and happy to answer any questions. Oh, the one other thing I would add to what Councilman Heenan asked before about different insurance costs for RCO and non-RCOs, we don't have direct data on that, as Jeff Hornstein said, but one of the reasons is there's a civic right in our area that elected not to become an RCO after 2012 precisely because they didn't want to get sued for zoning activities. So that's why we don't have the information, because people are deterred from becoming RCOs.
Just reluctant to do it. Yeah, I got you. And the Farnese legislation would address that front end issue, I guess.
It removes bad actors' incentives to even file the suits because, as Joe Schiavo said, the purpose of the suit is never to win. It is to drain you of money to silence you. So if there's a ruling on the merits before you have to spend very much money, there's no incentive to file the suit, and it takes the perverse incentive for your D&O carrier to work against your best interests and turns it into a regular incentive where they know there's more predictability, lower risk and lower costs, so your premiums go down and you won't get dropped.
Yeah, and from what I understand from what Councilman Squilla said, the problem with us doing a local SLAPP bill is the law department told us that the state has to define what SLAPP is.
Oh yeah, it won't work. They'll sue in Commonwealth Court, and the Commonwealth Court won't take heed of Philadelphia's law. It would be awesome, though, if it, as an interim stopgap measure, if the city could find a way to insure or indemnify RCOs and other groups that do this kind of work. That would not be a permanent solution, but it would insulate the groups from the cost, the stress, the intimidation, and it would insulate them from getting dropped if the city was covering them or facilitating a group coverage situation.
Something we probably had to take up with our law department. Councilman Heenan, and then Councilman Tallberg.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And that's exactly right. Again, I know Councilman Squilla, who's, back and forth, still conducting council business while, knowing how extremely important this is. In 2016, he did introduce some legislation, but it was determined by the law department that we were preempted by state tort law that enables us, or that prohibits us to creating our own kind of SLAPP measures when it comes to categorizing a lawsuit. But, I think the important thing here is he had mentioned, at the end of today, all right, what we're doing, and I want to ask everybody as we come up, I know we're short on time. I got a list of questions that I'm not going to, ask everybody, but some of you have already mentioned it. we're going to create our own discovery when it comes to on-the-record information to show that we are really kind of, all right, are as a community organization and civic organization, friends organization, are bound by city law, all right, on eligibility, on requirements, on planning in public opinions, so should be subject to some sort of legal immunity when it comes to freedom of speech. And I think ultimately that's what we want to show for the city as they try to find that opinion for preemption from 2016 that the law department had issued. So I know we're working with all members, but I think it's important to show, you know, if somebody, when you summarize your statements for some of the organizations that have lesser of resources, that has less resources than others, you know, something like Tacony. So for the record, Joe Sanuti's testimony is submitted on the record, so he has that in addition. So that is submitted, and we'll get Nancy, you will be submitted. But it's important to note that in Connie's very well put and succinct testimony off of the cuff, you know, the name of the RCO is the Tacony Civic Association, all right, but it transcends just Tacony, and you mentioned the boundaries go to Mayfair. So there is another neighborhood that is involved and engaged, and that happens all throughout the city of Philadelphia by virtue of the city zoning RCO law, which we voted on and you are governed by. And it is 20,000 parcels, it transcends neighborhoods, and it was also mentioned that it's hard to get people to get involved because of fear of being sued, all right, because it seems to become a trending practice for frivolous lawsuits, and we don't want that. So I'm just going to ask quickly, has it stalled membership drive, and not only membership drive for any of the RCOs, but officer recruitment? And how do you become a member? What is required to become a member of an RCO?
To become a member of the
How do you become a member
Civic.
of your civic association?
It's a
or any
very
civic
simple
association?
process, and I don't believe that the lawsuit language or talk out in the internet that everybody hears is stopping people from being members. We have a membership drive going on now, and people are renewing their membership and
What does
becoming
that mean?
members.
So how do you become a member?
But we have a simple 6-line form that you fill out, and we ask you to pick one of the committees that you'd like to be a little bit more involved in.
Is there an annual fee?
And there's a $10 a year membership and $5 for senior citizens. The membership is so low, we very often have people, you know, hand us $20 bills or, you know,
And
so.
what's the size of your general membership?
We have approximately 200 people in our general
200
membership.
people, half
in our
of them
general membership.
seniors, $5, 200 people. So that's not much money is what I'm
Oh,
trying
no,
to get to when it
no,
comes
no.
to.
No, these
in-
$10 memberships basically pay your, you know, to run your wheels, you know, to pay the insurance, to print your flyers, to hire somebody to deliver the flyers, to do all kind of the business of the Civic Association, to hire a band to do that festival. That's what that little bit of money pays for.
Including insurance.
Absolutely, the
So
insurance is first.
If you get a slap insurance, the $5 or $10, what would that do to your membership? Would you have to increase fees?
We would either have to increase fees or we would have to close down. We don't have a big source of money. We're not a grant writing organization. We don't look for big pots of money. We simply are a civic association trying to keep our streets safe and clean and our development something that we want. And $5 and $10 right now is enough. It will not be in the future with a lawsuit.
That's what I wanted to get on the record. Thank you so
And
much.
if I could say one other thing, these lawsuits are often not happening on a whim or after the community meeting when it didn't go their way, they decide. No, We have been to a number of community meetings where those developers are showing up with civil rights attorneys. They have their developer attorney that can answer all those questions about zoning and permits.
How do you get involved with, how does an RCO get involved in the zoning process?
In the zoning process, because we're a registered RCO, we are notified automatically when someone submits an application for a zoning,
I mean, aside from myself, my office, who notifies you?
oh, Ryan, we get a daily.
I mean, in addition to my office, who notifies you as an RCO?
Oh,
that there's a zone?
I'm sorry, yeah, the Planning Commission,
Okay.
right, notifies us, independent. We're an RCO, we get notified from them independently. We are told what the request is, and from that point, the wheels start to turn. The applicant is told to contact the RCO, they're given the contact information for the RCO, and they're demanded to notify us that they've submitted this and to schedule a meeting, a neighborhood meeting. They have to have that neighborhood meeting or the ZBA is not going to hear the case. They have to, and they have to show proof. You know, they have to show that they mailed the notifications out. We have to show that we had the meeting, and ZBA, here are the minutes to those meetings, and here's the attendance sheet, and here's how we voted. So there are very strict rules that we have to follow in order to submit our neighborhood's opinion of that zoning. And a lot of times we do it around their lawyers.
And what do you need from the city of Philadelphia in order to continue being an effective organization?
From the city, we need some protection that will allow us to freely discuss the pros and cons of development. And if that means that that the city needs to help us with an umbrella policy, or change the rules of an RCO, or change the rules of the game, I'm not sure what the end result will look like. But I know that the RCOs that are in place now are simple volunteers that need someone bigger in this playground. It's our playground, but we're not the big boys in it, and we really need the city to step up and offer us some protection.
Thank you. No further questions.
Thank you, Councilman. Councilman Taubenberger, please.
Thank you, Chairman Greenlee. I do want to thank Council Members Heenan and Squilla for coming forward and putting this resolution in, as well as their co-sponsors, Council Members Green, Parker, and Johnson. I am somewhat familiar with the issue. I'm also very familiar with good work the Friends groups do, particularly the Friends of Pennypack. I am also familiar what an RCO does, as I am a member through the Borough Civic Association and Town Watch. Actually, although I'm not running many meetings anymore, I'm still listed as the president. I will be resigning at some point this year, as soon as the board is ready to go without me. The city would be entirely different if we didn't have RCOs and Friends groups, to be very direct. The ability for neighbors to speak out what might be good or not good in their neighborhood, I think that's a freedom of being a citizen of the city of Philadelphia. The city would benefit by that. Even in the end, if we do not agree in total, or you lose the case, the fact that you spoke out and gave us your input as you see it, I think is a right that every citizen of the city of Philadelphia ought to have. The Friends groups, and I come back to my agricultural background, which I speak quite freely in this chambers, because I have a degree.
Yes, he does. Yes, he does.
I do, from agriculture. I was a ground supervisor at Friends Hospital for 3.5 years.
Wow.
A lot of people don't know that, but I was. My degree is in agriculture, agronomy, actually.
Oh, how about that?
We could not, as Friends Hospital at that time, been successful without the support of a group called the Friends Hospital Garden Club. We helped them wherever we could. Now, they weren't related to the city, but I know what a Friends group does. They bring a lot of labor, a lot of dedication and passion that you would never get anywhere else. When Linda and I chatted over the summer, she told me what happened with the fellas that, unfortunately, no one wants to lose a child when they drowned. But that wasn't because of the Friends groups. They had nothing to do with that. It'd be the very same if a tree, sometimes they fall over for whatever reason, would fall on someone. I don't think that is the responsibility of the Friends group. I'm not so sure it's not just an act of God, but the fact of the matter is suing these groups for these matters is so absolutely wrong. and now I want to talk to my colleagues, after my meeting with Linda Lauf, I called the city solicitor, and Sosi Talenti and I spoke about this. To be very blunt, I'm not going to give you word for word because I did not take notes, but I got the drift of it. It was not a good conversation. He more or less felt it was a right for people to sue each other. I get that as well, but these are groups that help the city. So somehow we must, Mr. Chairman, come together and work out some protection for these groups because they need it, and for our city to thrive, they must thrive.
That's right.
I want to thank all the folks that are here today to testify. And I do want to shout out particularly to Linda Lauf because I know, and her group, I know the dedication they give because I live in their neighborhood. I don't live far. I go fishing on the Pennypack. I depend on their cleanup and their erosion. Erosion helps the fish life there. You know, when they put erosion preventative things, they are part and parcel to our city, and we must protect them, and I will be very direct. As a councilman, I will do everything that I can to get this matter resolved. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councilman. And as was said early on, this is fact-finding day, but it's certainly not the end of it. We'll certainly be
Mr. Chairman?
working on this issue. Yes.
I'm terribly sorry. There's just one brief thing, a direct response to something that Councilman Heenan asked about a moment ago.
Okay.
And if not, that's fine, but it'll take 2 seconds.
All right, very quickly, because we have about 15 people still
There's a legal
listening.
principle that actually protects individuals
Okay.
operating in a governmental or quasi-judicial function. You can get cases dismissed for that. We actually tried that argument because
Okay.
we were an RCO, and because it was federal and RCOs were so new, it was rejected, but we're happy to supply you with the legal documents
Please.
related to that.
Yeah, anything you can give with that, it would be, yeah. And the record will reflect the Councilwoman Gim is present for the hearing. Thank you all very much.
Thank you.
For your next, Ms. Marconi, our next group, please.
Steve Masters, Brandy Bones, Ian Wilson, and Mike Severinson.
While they are approaching, just again, there is about 15 people still, and maybe more, listed to speak. So what I would ask the witnesses, I think we got a good background on what the law is, what it's all about. If you have something particular to add from your association, from your involvement, and again, I think with both Bella Vista and with Mayfair, we have your written testimony. So if you could just, anything adding without just, repeating what was already said would be great. Steve, I think your name was mentioned first. Why don't you go?
Okay.
Thank you.
Good afternoon, Chairman
We have your
Greenlee.
testimony too. Yes.
All right, great.
Thank you.
Members of the committee, my name is Steve Masters. I'm the president of Just Laws. Just Laws is a social impact law firm launched in Philly in October 2012, and we help our clients maximize their impact by combining traditional legal services with consulting around political and community engagement. Before I had my law firm, I worked here on the technical staff, and I was appointed to the mayor's task force on auto insurance, Mayor Street's task force, representing the council president, about 15 years ago now, I guess. And at that time, I was there with Lance Haver, who's the community engagement director for council. One of the areas that we looked at in the city at that point was we were looking at ways to reduce auto insurance rates for citizens of Philadelphia, and we were looking at the possibility of coming up with an insurance pool from the city's funds to allow to provide auto insurance for residents of Philadelphia. We ultimately went in a different direction and came up with some other strategies to reduce automobile insurance rates in the city, but the groundwork has been laid, and I know that Lance Haver is very familiar with that and can be very helpful in working with you and Councilman Heenan in particular to craft a insurance solution if that's where you're headed to. I wasn't here for the earlier testimony, so I imagine that there was testimony about the current SLAP legislation.
There was a lot of, we have the background, certainly to know all the information on the issue itself. So if there's something,
Okay.
you particularly want to add, that would be good.
I represent a number of RCOs throughout the
Right.
city that are, some of them are here, some of them have offered testimony or will offer testimony, and it's our position that these SLAPP suits are not only devastating, but they're basically using the courts, they're weaponizing our courts in a way to subvert our democracy and our community. So it's essential that the city take all stands that it can to come to the aid of citizens who are being inundated by these suits. And Just Laws is happy to participate in any way that we can be helpful.
Great, thank you, Steve. Who'd like to go next? There
Okay,
you go.
yeah, I'll just highlight a few things. My name is Brandy Bones. I'm Vice President and Treasurer of Bella Vista Neighbors Association, located in Councilman Squilla's district. And we almost were dissolved out of existence this past summer when we were unable to obtain insurance coverage as a result of being named a defendant in a lawsuit that we were ultimately dismissed from and found not liable in any way. But over the course of our defense, the insurer incurred substantial legal fees and then indicated they would not renew our insurance. I think to highlight the major points from the lawsuit that I'd like to say here is that in the course of going through that process, going out to brokers to try to find other insurance avenues, we discovered that the market for civic nonprofit market in Philadelphia, in part probably because of the way that registered community organizations are defined in our zoning code, many of those insurance companies have exited the market, just in general, are just not even considering insuring our types of civic groups. And it's just a hard to cover risk area. And so I think the other things I want to highlight from my written testimony is the next steps. The lawsuit that was against us was actually not a SLAPP lawsuit, although we are at risk of that in our role providing neighborhood input on zoning variances. But I think we would be served by making this a much broader conversation and comprehensive and reducing our risk profile, given our quasi-governmental role and unfunded role as an RCO. And so I think there are three things that I would love if you guys could consider as you're moving forward with your collection of information, which is an umbrella directors and officers insurance coverage for all qualifying Philadelphia RCOs, access to pro bono legal advice on insurance-related issues and coverage, and I think very importantly, formal training and guidance on RCOs on the specific role as it relates to the zoning process, as well as just general education on conflicts of interest and areas that can trigger lawsuits. BVNA is a fairly sophisticated RCO. We've been around before for, in some form or another since around 1990. Not all neighborhoods have that kind of history, and so we really need to provide the capacity building and technical assistance so that everybody can really understand the risks they're exposed to. Thank you for the opportunity to testify.
Thank you for the work you do. Please, identify yourself and proceed.
Yes, good afternoon, Chairman Greenlee, distinguished council members, interested parties. For the record, my name is Michael Servison, and I'm representing the Mayfair Civic Association this afternoon. I currently serve as their board secretary and zoning chair. My testimony is already in the record, so I'm going to keep it very short to a couple points that I'd like to stress. Civic associations, especially when it comes to the zoning, we need the insurance or some type of protection and coverage to mitigate the potential lawsuits from the different developers and individuals that are required to appear before the neighbors at our civic association meetings. Okay. The other point is, since the effectiveness of local civic associations requires attracting, training, and retaining volunteers from the community, it is essential that the insurance must be in place or some form of protection, otherwise volunteers may opt to not participate due to the need of weighing the risks of litigation and potential impact to them personally. And finally, in closing, the City of Philadelphia created the RCOs so that the local residents would have a voice in determining the direction of their neighborhoods. In its current format, with potential exposure to lawsuits, participation on these boards has become unattractive to many volunteers in the neighborhood. This may force a number of associations and RCOs to shut down operations. The city needs to provide a solution which eliminates the financial burden to the neighborhood associations and RCOs. And myself, and I'm sure all the group, are very grateful and thankful for City Council's leadership in attempting to work with us through this issue.
Okay,
Thank
thank
you.
you. Thank you very much. See, if I could ask you real quick, in your written testimony, you mentioned the Act 138 of 2000, the General Assembly.
Right, was that testified to already?
Pardon me?
Was that testified to before I came up?
Yeah.
Okay.
No. I want to be on the, just want to be clear, that was just geared towards environmental issues, is that right?
Right, so that's the current law we have in Pennsylvania,
Yeah,
is an
right.
anti-SLAPP law that just protects citizens from SLAPP lawsuits dealing with environmental regs, but
Right.
what I quoted was the findings, which are
Mhm,
not
right.
not in the code, but in the legislation,
Right.
which the General Assembly has found that SLAPP lawsuits are terrible
That's,
across
that was
the board.
my point, that
Yeah.
they talked about SLAPP issues, lawsuits generally, even though the law was geared towards environmental. So there is some record, some history of them.
Well,
certainly.
absolutely.
Yeah.
They didn't go far enough. That's the
Right.
problem.
I got you.
They got the right idea, they made the right findings, and then they didn't give us enough of a solution.
So you like a little more wide,
Obviously, there's a
overall.
political story behind this that for
Shocking.
sure.
Political, shocking.
Yeah.
Thank you. Councilman Heenan?
Thank you. Steve, and I think I'm glad the chairman had pointed that out in Act 138 there in the findings of law. My question to you is, from a legal position, do you see RCOs and community organizations in its various levels of friends of groups as quasi-governmental organizations?
No, I don't. What I see them as is having a formal status in our zoning process, but I think it would be problematic to the community groups if we were going to imbue them with a quasi-governmental status. It would restrict them, and it would probably be unconstitutional, because citizens can't be restricted in how we gather together to petition our government and mobilize and agitate for whatever we want. The issue is not that they're a quasi-agency like the PIDC or something. The issue is that because our zoning code has given a formal role to them, then there's a nexus that the city has a legitimate governmental interest in protecting those activities, and so it makes sense, and I think it's justifiable for the city to provide some kind of remedies, however you fashion them.
Their public participation is outlined in the framework of RCO legislation.
Well, they're regulated by the Planning Commission now
Exactly.
because of the zoning code, and so normally a normal neighborhood association that gets together, that does whatever they want, they're not subject to government regulation. They are to the extent that they're not going to discriminate against people or hurt people, but the Planning Commission tells them what needs to be in their bylaws and how to determine their leadership. So they're a regulated industry, let's put it that way, but not a quasi-governmental agency.
And that's what
Yeah.
I wanted you to clarify.
Okay.
On the record, all right, that they are governed. All right, there are certain requirements. There are requirements to legitimize them as an official registered community organization.
Yeah.
That is up for renewed by the.
It's not only
branch
that,
of
Councilman. I mean,
government.
their leadership, the way they choose their leadership, which is the ultimate
Through
governance
democracy,
power.
through a process of.
Well, it has
of
to be
voting.
approved by the Planning Commission. However, they choose their leadership has to pass muster by city government. So that is a very invasive type of regulation. I can't imagine something more invasive than the government telling a private group of citizens who their leader can be.
Right. And one question for both Brandy and Mike. Approximately, do you know how many position letters, or does your organization submit position letters that get sent over to the ZBA on the position of the type of development or non-development in the service area that you represent?
From the Mayfair side, we average generally 3 to 4 per meeting where we're hearing different cases. So that would equate to about 18, anywhere between 18 and 25 a year. where we're sending disposition letters over to the ZBA?
And we're about the same. We average maybe a little bit less, 2 to 3 a month per
And
month.
my question to follow that up is, how do you reach those positions?
Yes. Yes.
How? How? What is
Oh.
the process in which you reach those positions for those letters that you send over to the zoning board?
With Mayfair, we generally, as I think was described earlier, there's a process that the ZBA puts in place that is responsibilities tied to the developer or the person, the applicant petitioning. So once they do all their upfront work within the process, we schedule them and we put them on our Facebook page, on our website, and we announce that the hearings will be held. The neighbors are all invited and they should have received letters. Once they come in, we allow the applicant or the developer to actually present generally 15, 20 minutes. Some folks have different types of charts and/or PowerPoints or whatever they may do. We then allow all of the neighbors present to question. Any type of question is on the table as long as it relates to the subject matter at hand. Once the applicant is completed answering the questions, we put it to a vote of the neighbors that are members of the Mayfair Civic Association. So we generally go through opposed, not opposed, or not opposed with provisos, if that may be the situation. We want to add something to our normal provisos. At that point, generally within the next day to a week, I send a letter to the ZBA based on the information and the voting totals, and basically tell them that the Mayfair Civic position is X based on the voting that was done that evening.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Councilman, okay. Councilman Gim, did you want to?
Yeah, just very briefly.
Okay.
First of all, thank you, Chairman Greenlee and Councilman Heenan for leading this important hearing, and I really want to thank all the RCOs who've come out. This is an extremely important issue. And, you know,
Okay.
I've definitely taken into consideration all the things, and I'm sure many of us on City Council are very, very concerned about the aggressive nature which some developers have taken towards RCOs, and in particular exposing your vulnerabilities, that these are not organizations that can withstand the brunt of, you know, millions of dollars of legal suits that are filed at any given time, that too many, you know, certain types of developers might be willing to engage in. My only comment that I wanted just to address, since so many great people are in the room, is that while I understand the city end of it and thinking through some kind of support for RCOs as we try to figure this out, doesn't necessarily tackle the central question, and I hope everybody in this room and all of us on City Council consider how we can be very aggressive about supporting Senator Farnese's legislation that is currently in the Senate. It was approved. It's been stuck in Senate Judiciary. We've got to work as hard as we can collectively to get that out, because that's really the solution. We need legislation at the state level that protects the RCO. So we are absolutely hearing and listening, and I'm going to be very active around supporting the RCOs in this endeavor. But I hope we can also push that energy right now and get that legislation out. That's the only thing that's going to solve a lot of this stuff, and the aggressive measures that's going to put the developers in check and not see the kind of frivolous lawsuits that put our communities in danger.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, there's one other idea that I had come up with when I was listening to the conversation earlier, which is that in our Philadelphia County Court of Common Pleas, we came up with a mechanism to help in mortgage foreclosure actions without we didn't have the power as a city to change the law around mortgage foreclosure lawsuits, but we did create a process where those lawsuits were brought before a special part of the court and had mediators and had different processes that were done. It's possible that a similar type of process could be adopted by our County Court of Common Pleas that would allow SLAP lawsuits to be diverted into a situation where they would be resolved really quickly if they would be determined to be.
So that was something we would have to work maybe with the courts on, right?
It would be, but then it doesn't address the problem if those suits were brought in a different venue, like in federal court.
Right.
So, but it could be another positive
And we
approach.
just had an announcement yesterday, Councilman Gim's under Councilwoman Gims' leadership, dealing with tenant issues. So I guess it's along the same lines. Yeah. Okay. Great. Another thing to think about. Okay. All right. Very good. Thank you.
All right.
Thank you for your involvement. Ms. Marconi, our next group, please.
Tara Gontek, Linda Cowell-Smith, and Phil Gritzmacher.
Good afternoon. Haven't quite got to evening yet, so we're getting there. All right, who'd like to go first?
Okay.
Okay.
All right. Oh, good afternoon. Thank you for the opportunity to testify on this very vital issue. My name is Linda Caldwell-Smith. I am Vice President of Home Circle Civic Association. We're a relatively small RCO located in Northeast Philadelphia, right off of Home Avenue in the Boulevard down a little bit. We'll be celebrating our 10th anniversary this year, and we are fortunate in that we have not been slapped yet with a lawsuit. We do have D&O insurance, but we, after listening to this testimony, I mean, it's just terrifying. All I can say is we agree with everyone. We hope that we can get some action on it. And we look forward to working with Councilman Heenan and the committee on any legislative issues. And if I can just add a personal note, 26 years ago, I was in Harrisburg working with my former employer, a major union, as research director, trying to get taxi cab regulation enacted. And we did the best job we could at the time. But the one thing we didn't see coming was Uber. So when we decide to work to support Senator Farnese's bill, we really have to pay attention to the details, and we have to get it done because we don't want to be back here 10 years from now, 25 years from now, like they're doing in the taxi cab industry. We have to stay strong. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And your written testimony will be made part of the record.
Yes,
Yeah.
if I may add as well, I've also submitted on behalf of Bridesburg's Community Action Alliance, Daniel Adair, the president, written testimony as well. He could not be here today.
All written testimony will be made part of the record. Thank you.
Okay, before we go to the next witness to give testimony, Dana Dare is here. Or he'll be on the last panel, so he'll come up and summarize the testimony that's already submitted for the record. And I want to thank our next speaker here for being a true Eagles fan, wearing Eagles green.
Oh, there you go. Absolutely. We won't make you sing the fight song, but, you know.
Right.
My name is Tara Gontek. I am the president of Holmesburg Civic Association. I want to thank Councilman Heenan for bringing us together and everyone else for giving us an opportunity to discuss this very important issue. So as I mentioned, I'm the president of Holmesburg Civic Association. I was elected as of November 2017, so I'm relatively new, but I've been a member of the Civic Association for a few years now. Our organization, which is located in the 6th District in the Northeast, has existed in one form or another since 1901. We have a very long history, as does our neighborhood as a whole. We have a membership of about 170 members, and our membership fees are $5 yearly. So we have a very limited budget, to say the least, and we actually do not carry any kind of insurance because we are just not able to afford it. We have a small board. We're overextended, to say the least, but we do the best that we can in addressing RCO-related issues with zoning, and we're also a very community development-oriented civic association. So we take on a number of projects in the neighborhood to encourage economic development and improve general quality of life in the neighborhood. So it really comes down to a choice between, do we want to carry insurance, or do we actually want to make our community a better place to live and work? So we chose the latter. But it is difficult for us to recruit board members knowing that, any potential board member could risk losing their home simply by giving their opinion in, our city-sanctioned setting. We've received RCO training from the Planning Commission. We are or operating within all of the regulations of the city. So, we essentially have to follow all of the rules, but we carry all of the risk. And my fear is, while we have not had to deal with this issue as of yet, knock on wood, I fear that not only will we cease to exist, but if this continues to happen in other parts of the city, the RCO program as we know it will cease to exist, just from lack of interest. We can't risk losing our homes and our livelihood and everything that we are currently working so hard to protect, ironically, through the same process. That's basically why I'm here today, to speak on behalf of my organization and ask for some kind of assurance from the city that we can still continue operating as you guys have asked us to.
Yeah, we're going to
Thank you
keep
very
working
much.
on that. Okay, thank you. Thank you very much. Phil, how are you?
Good afternoon, Councilman Greenlee. Thank you for hosting this hearing. My name is Philip Gritzmacher. I am Secretary and a Zoning Committee member of the Lawncrest Community Association. And I'm here to ask that the city do extend some kind of protection to the registered community organizations. We do a lot of good work in our community. I pretty much have to echo exactly what the previous speaker said about the way we operate. We're one of the small civic associations that was referred to by the first testimony. And,
you get a lot of people to your meeting, though.
What's that?
You get a lot of people to your meetings. I've been.
Well, we get a lot of people, but small budget.
No, I got you.
And we do not carry any insurance either. So.
And you've been lucky enough, I guess, not to have any.
Yeah,
lawsuits.
I mean, I've been involved since the late 70s in my group on an officer since then, and we've been lucky to have no kind of lawsuit filed against us. We depend on just our incorporation as a nonprofit to hope the officers get covered and only the group itself can be sued, but we have never had any lawsuits.
Okay.
But it's terrifying to listen to what happens here, and it is very important that we continue our role, and it is required by the city. I mean, it's been mentioned, multiple times here. This is part of the new zoning code, and it is an important improvement from the previous zoning code to require developers and applicants to come before us and to speak. But without public input, free public input, it really kind of, this is very destructive of the process. And we do need the city to do some kind of umbrella policy or indemnify the officers and citizens in this process.
Okay.
And you have my written testimony as well.
Great, yeah, and that'll be made part of the record. Again, thank you. Thank you all for the work you do out there in your community.
May I add one thing?
Please.
Councilman, I'm also president of the Friends of Torresdale Library, and I'm on the Transitional Advisory Council for the Friends of the Free Library of Philadelphia. We have a policy, a citywide D&O policy that covers all officers in every specific branch where there is a Friends group. It makes recruitment much easier. This is something we need for RCOs. We have to know that our members are protected, and that's the way we can increase more participation, as Councilman Heenan noted. How do you get officers if you can't ensure them that their homes and their livelihoods are protected?
And who pays for that insurance?
The Friends of the Free Library.
Okay.
Yeah, it's an umbrella policy.
Okay, great.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you all very much. Ms. Marconi, who we have next?
Stan Sywinski, Madeline Shakumba, and Lucia Esther.
Yeah. Mr. Sawinski's not here, I assume? Had to leave? Okay. Whichever of you two would like to go first, please identify yourself and proceed.
Good afternoon, Chairman Greenlee.
Good afternoon.
And committee. My name is Lucia Esther, and I'm president of the West Powelton Saunders Park RCO. And we agree with many of the things that the people have said. But a little point that's a little different is the difficulty of obtaining insurance for RCOs begins at the Zoning Board of Adjustment. The ZBA requires corporations and nonprofits to be represented by a lawyer to participate at ZBA hearings. We have learned that the RCO and the community must be present at the ZBA hearings. When the community is against the variance, they must present their case in person to have even a small chance of the ZBA denying the variance. The RCO must also be present when the community supports a variance in order to avoid being perceived as just a no community. And our community has many ZBA cases a year, as many as 5 a month, which means losing pay time to go down there. To hire a lawyer for all these cases would be an enormous expense. A neighboring RCO occasionally hires a lawyer at a cost of $10,000 per case. Our community cannot, under any circumstances, afford such a legal bill. This would be an enormous expense of over $100,000 a year. With much difficulty, we have raised the funds to defend the ZBA against an appeal, since the city does not support its communities by supporting the ZBA in court. This makes it even more likely we will face an eventual SLAP suit. And we do have a developer who has been denied twice over a period of 2 years in between times. And we do have a court case in May coming up. And we've just had to pass the hat among the neighbors to supply the money for the lawyer. We observed that few RCOs come to the ZBA hearings in person to present their case. We suspect that the need to hire a lawyer is preventing them from participating. This leaves the community at a great disadvantage, one of the causes of the 90% variance approval rate. Because we cannot afford legal representation, we cannot incorporate, a basic requirement to obtain insurance. Without even incorporation, everyone who has ever attended one of our meetings is at risk of losing everything should an applicant sue. For this reason, some community residents do not participate in community meetings. A sad commentary on the state of civic affairs in Philadelphia. We urge City Council to work not only on protection from SLAP actions, but also to work on revising the ZBA regulations so that RCOs can incorporate and still participate in the ZBA hearings without the expense of legal counsel. Thank you very much.
Thank you, ma'am. Ms. Sukumba?
Thank you. My name is Madeline Shakumba. I represent the North of Washington Avenue Coalition. It's an organization that represents the area known as the Graduate Hospital. I come here today, I've heard so much from different people already. As you can see, many developers have become very abusive and have used various spurious methods in order to prevent RCOs from opposing them on their variance request. I'm not a lawyer, but from listening to what other people say, I'm going to make these suggestions. Whether or not they're legal, I don't know. I suggest that the developer be required to present his displeasure with the RCO, present their case before a city agency to determine whether or not it has merit before they can file a case, or something that will allow the court to make an inquiry into to see if they followed that procedure before they allow them to file in court. And that might alleviate a lot of these frivolous suits. I also am suggesting that maybe some kind of penalty, like I said, I'm not sure if it's legal or not, can be put against the developer for bringing such a frivolous suit because he has not followed the above procedures. Number 3, if the developer is having problems with an RCO, have a venue available to him whereby he can bring his concerns to them, such as a city agency, before a suit is filed. I think some of this would eliminate some of these frivolous suits. We as RCOs are facing a battle on 2 fronts. not just from the developers, but from the ZBA. ZBA to me is very biased, discriminatory, and highly partial. Why can I say that? I've been before them so many times. People come before them because they're asking for a variance. According to the zoning regulations, the ZBA, before it approves a variance, must make sure they meet the basic requirements of Section 14.303, subsection 8E.1.2. It basically talks about hardship. These are the rules. They don't follow them. They'll give approval for a variance for no reason, just for giving a variance. And I want to talk about this because it's really on my nerves. People get up there, especially talking about two-story houses, traditional neighborhoods and blocks with two-story houses. They are allowing them to add a third story without a setback. Now, according to Section 14.303, you have to have a hardship. The hardship that they complain about, oh, I want to have children. Or it's down the street. Having children, I didn't think it was a hardship. I didn't think your neighbor having what you want to have is a hardship. But they're allowing them to do this, and it's destroying two-story block neighborhoods. And I'm tired of it. We are tired of being short-circuited by the ZBA. We go there before them, and we are squashed in what we want to say. We don't need to hear what you're going to repeat if somebody else has said it. And all we got to hear the chairman say, my vote is yes, and then the rest of them like robots say, my vote is yes, and my vote is yes. We don't fear that we are getting a fair hearing with the ZBA. But that's my thing on this one. Now getting back to my original complaint about these frivolous suits. We are RCO. We are a volunteer organization. We don't get paid. In fact, we don't have any money in our account to pay for a lawyer. We have been able to get some pro bono lawyer representation, which has helped us to win a couple of suits. But that's rare and in between. My fear is this. If Amazon gets this contract and it comes to the city, I'm not in favor of it. Why? Because all hell is going to break loose. And then you think this is bad about people being on, getting their stuff in terms of losing their homes. It's going to be worse. Okay? Why? Because we're going to be like the Olympics. You know what happened to people who go in the Olympics and win the Olympics contract? Well, who gets hurt? The poor. They get moved out of their homes, the property gets taken over, all because they want to build different things to accommodate the Olympics. And after the Olympics leave, the city is poorer than what it was when it came in there, and saddled with various bills. I don't see Amazon as, how you say, helping us, okay? And I see that as a way to get us out of our homes and for further and more expeditious gentrification that we already got now. So I'm just putting it online about what I think about this Amazon deal. Okay? We,
All right, if I could ask you to wrap, because we still have some other people, so I could ask you to wrap up your testimony.
Again, I hope that you will
appreciate it.
consider my suggestions as to how we can end some of these spurious and uncalled for frivolous suits that we've been having. Amen.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much. Councilwoman Blackwell, you wanted to?
Thank you. I wanted to certainly thank both of those. I know that with them talking about Amazon coming and 50,000 jobs of $100,000 or more, we know that we need more even low-income and modern-income jobs. But we always thank Madeline Chicumba, although she's in Kenyatta Johnson's area. She always represents our entire city well. And we want to thank Miss Esther, West Poughton, Saunders Park, RCO. They are very diligent. Whenever there's something in their area, we're there, and we want to thank her for all the work they do.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Councilwoman. Thank you, ma'am. Thank you both. Ms. Marconi, our final panel, please.
Marlene Schleifer and John Dixon and Daniel Adair.
Other than these are the last ones we have on our list. Anyone else wanted to comment, say anything? No? Okay. So this will be our last panel right here. Please, identify yourself and proceed.
My name is Marlene Schleifer. I am the RCO rep for Ridge Park Civic. You should have my written testimony. We are
Yes.
a very, very small civic based in Roxborough. Our boundaries go from basically Domino Lane down to Leverington Avenue and from Henry Avenue down to the river. We collect the same amount for dues as the other woman mentioned, $10 a head, senior citizens are $5. We also collect business memberships. We try to get businesses to ante up $50 and we plug them with our newsletters. Actually, you had asked earlier whether anybody had any success with a countersuit, and our one experience with a slap suit involved our least favorite run-amok auto dealer who drove Roxborough crazy and is now elsewhere. But he sued us about 10 years ago, a little bit more, for $50,000, and we countersued. And it ended up being settled with no liability on either side. We have had officers and directors insurance for over 10 years. We had it at the time this suit happened, and we wouldn't be without it. We give up other things for it. But I also understand that there are other civics who have to make a choice, and they're the ones who are really stuck. So I do feel for them. It is correct that if we go before the zoning board, we have to come with representation. We deal with approximately 3 zoning issues a month, and it all costs money. So we have raffled off a Nordic track. We have had every kind of raffle known to man to raise whatever little bit of money that we have. So I think just even getting some sort of something through that will protect us from slap suits will be a big help. And thank you very much
Okay,
for
thank you.
listening.
Thank you for all you do. I'm going to say whoever has an Eagle shirt on can go next.
Good evening.
Hi.
I'd like to thank the council member, Bobby Heenan, for inviting us all here for this hearing, and the president himself for the chairman of the hearing. My name is Dan O'Dare. I'm president of Bridesburg Community Action Alliance. We're a newly formed RCO group in Bridesburg, section of the city. We're about 2 years young. I'm here with other RCOs and groups and speaking on SLAP and the pending legality that is weakly worded passing will affect monetary drain to our finances as a group. We appreciate the efforts of the state legislation in passing legislation, but it doesn't go far enough in addressing the drain to our monetary funding as a group. Being a newly formed group, we already face many obstacles in obtaining funding. Being one of 3 RCOs in Bridesburg, any attempt by outside forces impeding lawsuits against our group would destroy financially our group. I join our other RCO groups in asking and pleading City Council and Planning Commission to consider alternative options in obtaining and helping and financing lower cost director and group insurance for all RCO groups. RCO groups are voluntary staffed and serve a function of city government in not only zoning issues, but as a community link to all of city council and city government pertaining to our communities. Without such groups being the voice of the community, city council and city government will be without the voices that need to be heard.
Thank you, sir. Thank you. Whoever, again, you had that shirt on, but, whoever want to work it out. Please identify yourself and proceed.
Good afternoon. My name is Mark Morrison. I'm a member of East Tarsdale Civic Association, or as we're known, ETCA. Our president, Lou Hallis, has submitted testimony already.
We have his testimony, yes.
Yes. I just wanted to come down and speak today. I have been a member of the East Tarsdale Civic Association for over 30 years. I am currently on their executive board, and when the issue of the SLAP lawsuits came up, we as a executive board discussed and talked about it. We looked into insurance, which takes up quite a bit of the budget. We do currently right now have insurance, but like all the other civics, we charge a $10 individual membership fee, $12 for family. It's a yearly fee. We meet monthly. The executive board meets monthly. We not only deal with zoning issues, but we deal with all issues in the community. The Civic Association, over the years that I've been a member, has fought to maintain and improve the quality of life in our community, which our boundaries come from basically the Academy Road on-ramp of 95, and it runs north to the Pequesing Creek, and we run from Frankfurt Avenue to the river. And in the years that I've been there, the Civic has done tremendous work in improving and maintaining the neighborhoods and the quality of life that people come to enjoy. And that's why people like to stay. When those issues start to deteriorate and when there is no representation from the people, you're going to have them leave. And I really don't want to see that. I've been a member, lived in the city all my life, and I would continue to do so. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, sir. Please, identify yourself and proceed, please.
George Matisick with the Philadelphia Parks Alliance. I just wanted to quickly address something that was brought up earlier, which was the umbrella insurance for a number of, either for the RCOs or the Park Friends groups or the rec centers, the advisory councils, where the Philadelphia Parks Alliance provides the umbrella insurance for all the advisory councils throughout the city. But I can tell you this year rather, it's not like we just are able to call up the flow from Progressive and get a quote. Like we had to go to 4 or 5 different insurance companies, and it took us about a month and a half, not to get the best price, but literally just to get insured. That it's incredibly complex insurance for us to get for all of the advisory councils, considering all of the work that they're doing. And so it really, for all of the organizations that we're talking about today, umbrella insurance can be one of the potential options for us to look at, but it certainly shouldn't be the only one, because it is going to be more and more difficult going forward, I believe, for us to get insurance for umbrella organizations like ours.
Yeah, I understand. Okay, thank you. Councilman Heenan, you want? Yeah.
No, I'm just going to close.
On the end. Okay, all right. Thank you all very much. Thank you for all the work you do in your communities. And with nobody else to testify? Okay, very good. Thank you. Going to recognize Councilman Heenan.
First, I want to, again, thank everybody who took the time to come out here. You volunteer your time on a daily basis back in your communities, and believe me, Chairman Greenlee understands the importance of the quality of life when it's related to zoning in everybody's neighborhood. I mean, he runs an incredible ship when it comes to the Rules Committee. He understands zoning and servicing neighborhoods for decades here in the city of Philadelphia. So he sees how things have transformed and have morphed into, let's just say SLAP isn't new. It's been around. Councilman Squilla looked into it in 2016, and before that, someone else did it. But we heard today, 2 other organizations that have an umbrella, policies that provides for other members to get insurance. So I'm going to end with a brief statement, but I again want to thank the chairman for his extreme consideration, and more importantly, Noel, who staffs this committee, and my staff, working with all the members of City Council, Councilwoman Gimmon, who's here remaining, same thing with Councilwoman Blackwell and everybody. This is an important issue to all members of City Council because, and you'll get what I'm saying in a second. In 2012, the City of Philadelphia incorporated registered community organizations into the zoning process with the underlying value that the surrounding community deserves to have their voices heard when development is occurring in their neighborhood. In the absence of a strong anti-SLAPP law at the state level, which should be resolved in the PA House because it's in the judiciary. Now, it is Senator Farnese's bill, but it lies in the House of Representatives. So you need to lobby your state representative, and especially in the Judiciary Committee, because that's where it sits right now. So, and anyway, they must now consider what, as a city we now must consider what the city can do to protect the values that we have already codified, which is our zoning code. That our neighborhood and our civic associations, our friends of groups, and the communities play a vital role in developing our communal environment. Their perspective, your perspective, is something that we require for cases that end up to go before the zoning board of adjustments. And I feel fairly confident, and I can speak for all members when I say this of City Council, that before an issue or a statement that we weigh in on and make a public comment on, and we always ask for the opinion of our local community organizations that when it's occurring in and throughout the city and in our districts. So it is important to hear what the community has to say. And we want to know whether you are comfortable with the changes and what is being proposed throughout the various neighborhoods and the various types of development. So we must find ways to help protect your voices, or we must work collaboratively to make it easier for the community groups to state your opinions. And your opinions is freedom of speech, last I heard. All right, so today I'm calling on the administration to work together with not just my office, but my colleagues as well, and the various community groups that have graciously given up your time to come here to develop a pathway towards providing D&O insurance and coverage for all RCOs. Until the state is able to come up with a long-term solution, I feel it is our responsibility to take action and to protect the short-term interests of our citizens of the city of Philadelphia. So I thank you all for your input. It is vital and it's critical, and I thank you all for taking your time out for being down here. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Councilman. Thank you for your Thank you for your leadership on this, as I said before, very important issue, and the work will continue. With that, the Committee on Rules on hearing on Resolution 170968 will be held to the call of the chair. Again, thank you all very much for your participation.